delay due to the service in lunch that didn't start on time, like we developers always try to do, to be on time. We will brief better tomorrow. But anyway, no time will be lost for us because we developers are smart and we have some buffer built in. So everything will simply move 10 minutes, okay? We had the buffer anyway. So no problem at all. Relax and ready for this new session. And this session is about the FNC components. Just for my knowledge, how many of you have already been using FNC components? Okay, that's actually quite a lot. So I'll try to, because I also meant this presentation to be for someone who was totally unfamiliar with FNC. So I'll try to keep the balance between content for someone who is unfamiliar, and of course I see a lot of you are familiar with it. Okay, so the changed developer landscape. I think if I look in the audience that many of you might already have been developing software in '95, right? And you still have memories about Windows 95, the colorful Windows version at that time. But I think that the picture is, I think in '95, if we as software developers were developing software for the Windows platform, we pretty much felt like the king. If we created software for Windows, we served like 95% of the audience. Okay? And how has this changed so many years later, 2023? If you see all the platforms these days that are available and that people are actually using for doing all kinds of things. So we got, I think, everything really accelerated with the iPhone in 2006. iOS operating system, everyone wanted to create apps for that operating system. Mac, with the rise up of the iPhone, Mac became popular again. Mac OS, people wanted to create software for Mac OS. Then, of course, Google introduced Android. Android was cheaper, free software, etc., more open. So everyone started to want to create software for Android devices. Then suddenly the Raspberry Pi popped up and got in, I think in no time, extremely popular for all people in the IoT things and hobbyist things. Linux has been always kind of around and is up till these days still popular, certainly in backend environments. So also an interesting platform. And of course, not forgetting the browsers. Web development, browsers are a platform as well. So these are all the targets that are certainly interesting in 2023. So facing this enormous challenge with so many platforms, what can we do as developers? Because as I explained in the first keynote in the morning, after all, I think we still want to go for productivity and be productive dealing with all these platforms. So why did we have the idea about FNC? FNC stands for, who knows what it stands for?
Framework neutral. Framework neutral component.
Perfect. You have a mug, but the mugs are upstairs, but for sure you will get the mug. You deserve it. So framework neutral components, that's the idea we came up with, and what was driving us to bring up something like FNC. First of all, it's about reducing the learning curve. So if you use some software development methodology in combination with components, if you can use these components on all the platforms with all the frameworks, and if you go through the learning curve once, well, you have one. If you need to create something for another platform, you don't have to do the learning curve twice. Reuse of code. I think many of you will have some common code bases, libraries that you share among different projects. So when you deal with user interface controls, that's the same idea. Why would you not reuse code in connection with UI controls when you have a new project that possibly targets a different framework? And if you have that set of components, that makes it easier in many ways. One solid, reliable set, instead of doing that same work, maybe, who knows, for how many targets, 4 times and more, for all these different targets. And so, to a certain degree, if we look at Delphi with its VCL framework and the FMX framework, to a certain degree that is already the case. In the VCL we have the T-edit, in FireMonkey we also have T-edit. We have T-button, VCL, FireMonkey, etc. I'm saying explicitly to a certain degree because in the details they are not 100% the same. Who works with both VCL and FNC? So you will know, for example, for me it's quite irritating that a label in VCL has a caption property and in FireMonkey framework it has a text property, right? So that's one of these subtle differences. But still, the idea is kind of, okay, T-edit behaves like an edit control everywhere, okay? With FNC, our idea is they are 100% the same. So no confusions between caption and text. So with these things in mind, what we wanted to create, one set to reduce the learning curve, to do the development once, to do bug fixing once and have it everywhere solid and robust. We created this FNC framework, or I rather call it, it's not a framework, I call it an abstraction layer. And so framework neutral components achieve that there is only one code base for UI controls. So it covers UI controls, but meanwhile, it started with UI controls, but meanwhile it's much more than just UI controls. We also introduce this approach for a REST API access, for creating web controls, reusing web functionality actually, and also business logic. And with that approach, for you it's one learning curve. I think that's an advantage. For you, that's one license. I also think that's an advantage. You can reuse your code, and actually with these components you have the full freedom. Whatever project some customer is asking from you, you just pick the target that the customer asks for. Your set of components is ready to be used in any of these targets. So how did we create this set of components? As I mentioned, everything is based on the FNC abstraction layer. So you can consider the abstraction layer as the thinnest possible layer between the FNC component interfaces and the underlying interfaces from the 4 frameworks here, being the VCL framework, the FMX framework, LCL, that's the Lazarus used framework, and then WebCore in the web interface in our WebCore product. And so this, if we code against this abstraction layer, we know that this code will work everywhere, thanks to this abstraction layer. But it's very important to realize, first of all, it's the thinnest possible layer. Second, if you use an FNC control in a VCL application, it really behaves as a VCL control. At that moment, technically, it is a real VCL control. That also means that you can use it together with any other VCL control. It even, if you have an FNC panel, for example, it can even function as a panel that hosts other VCL, standard VCL controls, other third-party VCL controls, whatever. Because simply it is, at that moment in time, it behaves, it is a VCL component. And the same applies for the FireMonkey framework. So you can mix and match whatever other FireMonkey controls together with FNC. So some people have the idea that when you use FNC, you have to use everything FNC. But that's absolutely not the case. If there is, for example, one FNC component that might be interesting for your use in an existing large VCL applications with, who knows, loads of other VCL third-party components, you can just add that FNC component to the application. It behaves like a VCL component and it feels right home in that application. If we look at the type of components that meanwhile in the process of creating this FNC family of components, there are roughly spoken 4 types of these components. So first of all, the non-visual components. They are not that much, but okay, it's a separate category. There are the user interface components, so everything that deals with visual controls interacting with user via mouse, keyboard, touchscreen, etc. Then we have the category of REST API access components. So these are a set of components that enable you to access cloud services without you requiring to know anything about that cloud service API. So you don't have to study it, experiment, test, etc. These ready-to-use classes do everything under the hood. And then finally, that's actually the newest set of components within this family. It's the web technology surfacing set of components. So some things are available in the sphere of web development that might be of use in your VCL, FireMonkey, whatever applications, and that is what I would treat as a different category of components. And so we actually, the ID for the FNC components started in 2016, and who knows what the first FNC component was that we created in 2017 after we did all the research and development to set up this abstraction layer. So 2017 was the first year we had an FNC component, no IDs here in the room. It was the FNC chart. That was the very first FNC component we created. And so we are now 6 years later, and that's the entire family of FNC components that we have meanwhile. Where can you use these FNC components? I explained that you can use them for the VCL framework, for the FireMonkey framework, for the LCL framework, and for the WebCore framework. So obviously, if we talk about VCL FMX, that means they can be used in the Delphi IDE, and they can also used with C++ Builder. They are also using LCL framework, so you can use these components in the Lazarus IDE. And know that the Lazarus IDE, you can install this IDE on at least 4 operating systems, being Windows, Mac, Linux, but also something like Raspberry Pi. And so you can install the FNC components in Lazarus running on these 4 operating systems. And finally, there is also FNC that can be used from the Visual Studio Code free IDE to use the FNC components within the context of a WebCore application that you create with Visual Studio Code. Those who attended the session from Jose this morning will have gotten information and see how WebCore works in Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code runs on Windows, Mac, Linux directly. There is also a cloud version of Visual Studio Code. it's just the compiler that doesn't work yet in the cloud version, but on the other targets you can use the FNC components directly from the IDE. So this is briefly coming back to the fact that this abstraction layer is as small, as light as possible, where we will use from the operating system, from the framework, everything that's available. It's not about duplicating code, thick layers between things. No, wherever possible we will use the native controls. For example, if think about an FNC grid and this editing a cell in the grid, when you decide, okay, I want to edit the grid with an edit control, well, in Windows, that will be the native Windows edit control within that cell. If you decide to use a combo box, it will be a native Windows combo box. And the same applies to the other frameworks, other operating systems. So let's now start to go over the types of components, and let me introduce what exactly the FNC brings in the mix in these different categories of components. So for the non-visual components, we introduce the TMS FNC custom component class, and we add, in addition to that class, an interface for persistence. That means that you can easily persist these classes in JSON. So it automatically stream all the properties to JSON and vice versa. Also, online help linking is done from that standard base class for non-visual components. Then the visual user interface components, we introduce several things here, which is first of all the base class, the TMS FNC custom control. You can compare that actually directly to in VCL the T custom control, but if we develop against the interface of a TMS FNC custom control, that code will run everywhere. What we also needed was a TMS FNC graphics interface, and that interface is the interface that takes care of all the drawing. So you draw rectangles, text, images, etc., all with the TMS FNC graphics interface. If you code against that interface, again, it will work everywhere. On the VCL, it will use the VCL canvas to perform the drawing. On FireMonkey framework, it will use the FireMonkey canvas. And in a web environment, anyone knows what it will use in a web environment to perform the drawing?
JavaScript.
JavaScript is the code, the language in which it will finally run in the browser, but what kind of HTML? HTML canvas, that's correct. So I remember you as the second mug winner. Okay, so we use on web, we use the HTML canvas element to perform that drawing. What we also wanted to introduce is a layer for dealing with images, so that we had one interface to deal with the widest range, possible range of image types. Of course, bitmaps, PNG, GIF files, icon files, but also important SVG files. So FNC bitmap supports FNC images out of the box, so sharp rendering independent of your screen resolution is possible through the FNC bitmap. Third category is the REST API access components. So what do we need to offer there in our interface? Well, that is of course HTTPS calls to all the HTTPS methods need to be covered. But also importantly is dealing with OAuth 1, OAuth 2 these days, authentication and authorization. So those of you who have used REST APIs already, public-facing REST APIs where authentication is needed, that OAuth 2 flow is integrated in the FNC custom cloud-based class. So if you descend from there, you have actually OAuth version 2 built in out of the box for free. And also, I think an important thing is that it offers the choice between a synchronous access and asynchronous access. So in some, I think in ideal scenarios, you use async calls with HTTP. If you use async, then you never have a situation where your whole application is freezing because some HTTP server is not responding fast enough, and in the worst case is even doing a timeout. Okay, and with asynchronous approach, you can avoid these kinds of problems that your application freezes. But for your programming flow, I can fully understand that the synchronous approach is easier to develop against. So a synchronous way is also possible, is also offered. The fourth category is the category that surfaces for you web technology in whatever type of application that you are using. There we use the base class, the FNC custom web control. What is actually happening here is that this is a browser, an embedded browser that is as a basic building block, and what we do here is building into that custom web control the bridging between the native application and the world of the embedded web browser, and vice versa. That means that we can call functions from in our native code to code that is running in that embedded web browser, and vice versa. If some events are being triggered in the embedded web browser, this JavaScript event in this case can be caught by native code that responds to this JavaScript event. So what do we have in these different categories? First of all, have a look at non-visual components. So here we have a PDF generation library. So you can actually programmatically create PDFs from all these types of applications. What we also have is, let me have a look. That's okay. That sums up everything that is available in the PDF engine. What we also have is the SVG rendering engine. So it parses the SVG file, it renders the SVG file in the FNC graphics layer. Third, what we have is full JSON parsing and generation. So all things needed to perform encoding and decoding of your specific data types, etc. That is all built in, all supported. Before we are going to have a deeper look at the internals of the user interface controls, I want to introduce the concept of these components and show you an example. So we have our FNC Maps component. No, this is not the one I wanted to show. We have our FNC Planner control. Here we go. So that is the FNC Planner, and here we are in a Windows application. And I will add some code. And what I will do is the following. I have a planner item. Planner item. That should be it, okay. And I can do TMS FNC planner dot add item, and I can choose some start time and end time. Let's give it like a short time. That's it. And then I can set properties of this planner item that I create. So this will be my title, and I also have text, and this is, for example, TMS Training Days, like this. So let's see what happens. So I'm now compiling and running this VCL application. Okay, so here is the day with some, as example, items that are already in there. You see that this is the time, the blue dot is where we are at. And so if I add this item, obviously it was added at the time that I wanted, and you can drag it around and manipulate these things. What I'm going to do now is add a new project, and I will choose as a new project a multi-device application, so a FireMonkey application. So it's adding the FireMonkey application to my IDE. There's some issue with Delphi 10.4 is the IDE that I'm using here, and so here I'm also getting my FNC planner. So FireMonkey application, and what I will do is also add a button, and I will actually just copy and paste the codes from my VCL application to my FireMonkey application.
You need to select the button, not the form.
I would almost say 2 mugs. But it would be unfair to the others. I want to give the others also a chance for more mugs. All right, so I think everything is correct now. No? What did I do wrong? Okay, I messed up with this event handler. Let's have the IDE clean it up itself, and then I can just run it. And so, as expected, here is my FireMonkey application. So, okay, the dot is the current time, and I add it, and it is here displayed at the current time. But okay, we can add one more challenge, and that is add yet another new type of project. No, I don't want to add an existing, add a new project. And in this case, I will choose a TMS Web Core project. So we are generating here a web client application that will be running in the browser. And I drop this same FNC planner on the form, and that same button on the form. In this case, it is a web button. And I add exactly that same piece of code that is still here to this web client application, and I compile and run the application. So what's happening now is that the application is being transpiled to JavaScript code, and with the HTML JavaScript combined, we have something that will be running directly out of the browser. So here is our application in the browser, same planner, and as you can see, same behavior, and we can do the same with items. We can drag them around. We can click them to edit these items, so it behaves exactly the same as it is in the VCL or the FireMonkey framework. We are not going into Lazarus or Visual Studio Code, but actually that could have been possible doing exactly the same in these other IDEs. So now that you have seen this, let's dive a little bit deeper on how we achieved that you can use this FNC planner everywhere. So first of all, let's see what we have used, what this abstraction layer will use underlying for anything that has to do with drawing our control, rendering our control. So on VCL, obviously, everything is happening on the VCL tCanvas class. In the FireMonkey framework, it is also called the tCanvas class, but tCanvas in FireMonkey is radically different from the tCanvas in the VCL. But FNC uses underlying in FireMonkey the tCanvas FireMonkey class. LCL has a tCanvas class that is more or less the same as the VCL tCanvas, so that's what we use in LCL. And in WebCore, there is also a tCanvas class. As we mentioned, this will render itself in an HTML canvas element. And we modeled that WebCore tCanvas class more or less the same as the VCL canvas class to actually enable your reuse of existing Delphi code that used the VCL canvas. And so here we have, in a nutshell, a little bit the differences, technical differences between the canvas in these different frameworks. So, for example, a big difference between FMX and VCL is that in FMX, the coordinate system is based on floating points. The VCL coordinate system is based on integers. So logically, for drawing the coordinate system in FNC will be floating point. And it will just be rounded off when it is being used as a VCL component. We also have a floating point coordinate system in web. And also a difference is the color space. So VCL typically has a 24-bit color space, and we have a 32-bit color space, both in the FireMonkey framework and in the WebCore framework. For drawing images, we are also using the underlying images where, or picture supporting components or classes where possible. And so this is an overview of the underlying classes that we use in these different frameworks. So here we have the base classes. The base classes that from this abstraction layer that we use everywhere. As I explained, the TMS FNC graphics consider that as the canvas class against which you will do all the drawing. In the VCL we draw with a T pen and a T brush, and so we also needed some equivalent that would set pen color, brush colors in all these platforms. So the abstract class for that is the TMS graphics stroke. That maps actually in the VCL framework on T-Pen. There is the graphics fill class that maps on the T-Brush class in the VCL, and that maps on a fill in FireMonkey and a stroke also in FireMonkey. We also have an abstraction class for dealing with fonts. Anyone knows why also for fonts we needed to introduce an abstraction class? And it's to give you a hint, there is a difference between the VCL T font and the FireMonkey T font. No one knows that difference? No? So the FireMonkey T font class does not have a color property, while the VCL font class has a color property. As we want you to be able to code everything against the same interface, we introduced the TMS FNC graphics font. And here we are not going into much of these details, time is too short, but this is actually the abstract methods in the FNC custom control class that will abstract for you what is a mouse event in VCL, what is a mouse event in FMX, what is a mouse event in WebCore and LCL, etc. And the same applies for keys. So if you use these overrides, you deal with mouse, keys, etc. everywhere. Anyone actually knows why we have this mysterious %h minus around some parameters? Where would that come from? That is something that comes from LCL, Lazarus FPC compiler framework, that will otherwise give you a warning if you do not give that define on these parameters. So the FPC compiler can sometimes be extremely picky and give warnings where you think, why is that worth a warning? But it is what it is, and that's the very reason why it is there in the code. And this is the FNC graphics class. As I explained, this will abstract the canvases on the different frameworks. And this is the set of methods that are available in that abstract class. And you will notice that, for example, something like draw a round rectangle, that is not directly available in, I believe, the FireMonkey graphics class, but it is available in other classes. So we introduced it ourselves, and we do the necessary things to make it draw a round rectangle. The same actually applies to, for example, more complex fills, like gradient fills with different directions, color from and color to, etc. So that's also something we deal with for you. And so here is a brief overview. It's just a small extract from all the visual controls that we have meanwhile developed with the FNC architecture. And so the demo I showed you with the planner, let us move on to the cloud interfacing component REST APIs, and that is available in the FNC core, and it is turned into classes specific to various public REST APIs in the FNC Cloud pack. So that's also something to remember, that this actually, the whole abstraction layer is in FNC core. Okay, so if you just use FNC core, you could actually build everything else or any custom control yourself. Everything is in FNC core, for user interface controls, for self-persisted non-visual classes, for components that expose web technology, but also for these components that give you access to cloud services. And the base class here is the cloud, well, that's part of the base class, the cloud base request that represents an HTTP requests with everything that comes with it, say the headers, the post data, all these kinds of things. And then HTTP request has a HTTP request result, and so that is made available, made accessible through the cloud-based request result. And all that, that's yet another class that is also frequently interesting to have. That is the class to build post data, HTTP post data. Who has already dealt with posting to HTTP servers? Okay. I think you will know that once you start having to deal with an HTTP server that expects its data to be encoded as multi-variable form thing, it can get complex to put the data in the right order, the right structure, so that your HTTP server accepts it in the way it really expects it. Okay, and that post data builder will help you to do that, so you don't have to bother about in the multi-form posts about the specific boundary markers that need to be between the different parts in the multi-form posts. The post data builder does this all for you. And the class that exposes then everything does actually the hard work. That is the custom cloud base, and so it's from here that you can perform the HTTP requests. As you can see, it can perform a single request, but you can also schedule multiple requests to be handled all at once. So that is something you would typically do with add requests. So you can add, like, let's say 10 requests and then say, okay, now execute all requests. That's a difference between, for example, the HTTP components that are standard built into the Delphi IDE. And this is a brief overview of the cloud services that we offer classes for to easily access them. I want to show in a demo two different things. First of all is the REST client. So the REST client is what you will typically want to use if you want to use or access a cloud service that is not surfaced in our set of components. So I drop an FNC REST client on the form. And if I go from here, actually something is not right. I need to have a look if my package, you can see that I have quite a lot of packages installed, and even though it looks like one package to make that possible is not installed. I will show it in a different way. I think I should be able to do it this way. Okay, here it is. So that's a visual design time usable tool to actually first test accesses to other REST servers, see the responses, and to give you an example, okay, I need...
Is it the same as REST Insight?
REST Insight is a standalone version of this, what I'm showing here in the IDE, correct. So I need some URL, and okay, this is the URL that I wanted to use. So let's fire up the REST client again. Okay, and here I can, so this is an HTTP endpoint, and I can invoke it from here. And as you can see, it already shows the response, which is basically a JSON array. Okay, and here you can see, you can set and see if in case you do an HTTP post, you can set the body data, etc. So all the information of the HTTP request is there. What is also interesting is that based on this response, it will already generate the Delphi classes that can automatically deal with this response. So it figured out that within this JSON array here, okay, this is an array of objects if we treat it from Delphi language. And so it figured out, okay, let's create a Delphi class. In this case, this, let me have a look. This is actually the class that has the properties that are represented in JSON. And on top of this, it creates a class because we have an array of these objects. So it created a class with a generic list of these classes. Okay, so that is something that you, well, first of all, if you set everything right, typically you will also need to set, for example, authentication headers. If you perform against public REST APIs, if you set up all these things here and they prove to work, these settings will be automatically applied to your REST client component. And so you are sure that it will work if it works here, when you also use it in your application when the application is compiled. That is actually the very reason why we developed this REST client editor, because otherwise what you need to do is, okay, I set all kinds of properties for my REST client, and you compile, run, it fails. And then, okay, you missed some settings, etc., and same cycle again, compile, run, fail. And if you do that 10 times, your head almost explodes. And as such, you can test everything in advance, and as a benefit, you have these Delphi classes that are generated for you if you are working with new APIs for which you do not have corresponding classes yet.
Also,
Yes?
the sub-arrays and everything is generated in this class?
Yes.
JSON with all the
Yeah, also hierarchical objects, indeed, yes. And now I want to show you a demo of actually using a cloud service. So we go to the cloud pack, and there I pick from the demos, it should be this one, the cloud services. Let's pick the VCL one. Here we go. So what do we have here to demonstrate this? We have the cloud storage service demo. That is a, I would say, yet another advantage benefit in this component. This is a component to deal with cloud storage services, which are at this moment the popular services: Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Dropbox, Box.net, and a few others. Okay, and so with the FNC Cloud Storage component, there is just one property that lets you select the service you want to work with. That means that if you develop, for example, typical example is sharing common application settings on a cloud storage, so that you don't store them locally, that you can use that from everywhere. Okay, so if your customer says, I'm fine with Google Drive, okay, you code it against Google Drive, and maybe some other customer says, I don't want to use Google Drive, I have my own Microsoft OneDrive setup, please make my application use Microsoft OneDrive. So that means with one property switch, which is actually here on the component, the service property, and it shows you all the services supported. And of course, there's just a little more thing to do than just select another service. There is something else that you will also need to set as a property, which is no one here in the room. What other thing you will need to set if you want to switch from Google to Microsoft? The key, of course, the API key. So that, of course, we cannot provide for you. You need to apply for a key yourself. And of course, if you want to start using OneDrive, you request your key and you drop your key in the component and you're up and running. But all the other code actually remains exactly the same.
I think that's but you also use the signed URLs to, when you have a document that is on Google Drive in an environment that's protected, that you need a signed URL to get this document. Can you also use it here?
I think that, yes, but that should be directly, you don't need this component for that. That should be directly accessible with the regular REST client component, where you use the signed URL and, for example, perform an HTTP GET on it to get the document. Yes, yes. So strictly spoken, that component here to access cloud storage is not needed for that. So now I select here Google Drive from my combo box. My application key and secret is here set at application level. And so when I perform connect, here I'm getting the structure of my Google Drive. And from here, these, I think these are, for example, this is a Microsoft docx file. When I perform download, it will download this file from my Google Drive, or when I pick a file and upload, it will do the same. If I now switch to OneDrive and I perform connect, it's here, now it picked up all my files in my Google Drive, okay? And so from here I can also perform download. But the code to do that download, to do that upload, etc., to create a folder, it's 100% the same code. It's just that property switch for the service and of course the service keys itself. But other than that, your code is 100% identical. All right. So these demos we had. And what is REST Insight versus the REST Client Editor? That is, if you want to play with REST APIs directly from your machine, so not from within the IDE, you just launch the REST Insight tool, and you can test against your own APIs, public-facing APIs, etc. So that's actually a tool we developed from this built-in IDE editor, with that difference that you can use that client tool, REST Insight. We developed it as a FireMonkey application, and so it is usable from Windows, Mac, and also Linux. And that brings us to browser-based, embedded browser-based controls. So what is the idea here? Well, it's no surprise that after so many years, the web offers a wealth of all kinds of functions, services, etc. That can be also very interesting to consume these libraries, services, whatsoever, from a native application. And so what we actually did is enable you to consume these kind of things from your native application through a embedded web browser. And as I explained, with a bridge that you can control what happens in your embedded browser, and vice versa, when something happens in your embedded browser, react to it from your hosting native application. Technically, let's have a look how this is created. So if you use this technology on Windows, it will use the meanwhile embedded browser on Windows. So Microsoft started this effort a couple of years ago to replace Internet Explorer engine by the Edge Chromium embedded browser. Meanwhile, Windows 10 has it on board, Windows 11 has it on board. If you have an old machine and it does not have it on board, you can install it. But the idea is what was previously generally accessible as the Internet Explorer engine is now the web view, which is based on the Edge Chromium browser engine. The main message here is that there is no extra things to install on none of these platforms. On Mac and iOS, we use the Safari-based browser engine, so the WK WebView control that is. On Android, it's obviously also based on the Chrome engine, and it is the WebView embedded web browser. On Linux, Raspberry Pi, there it is the WebKit that is being used, and of course you can also use that within a web core application, but a web core application already runs in the browser. So anyone an idea what we will use when we run this within a browser already as a web client application?
Frame.
Correct. Who said Frame? But you already have a Mac. Yeah. I'm sorry. We'll need to. Okay. We have a deal. I get a Mac for you. Okay. Indeed. So this runs in a Frame. A Frame can be considered as an embedded browser in a web browser. And this is here what this base class for working with this exposes. So here what you can see is things like accessing what's inside the browser, so the HTML, but also injecting in the browser that it should load some CSS, load some JavaScript library, etc. with the load links call. Execute JavaScript, so suppose that you have a JavaScript function written function sum, and then you add just two numbers. You can call from your native application that particular JavaScript sum function. So you would just call execute JavaScript between quotes sum, and it will trigger the complete event when the function has has been executed. And then the call custom event, that is what you use to bind things to JavaScript events. So if you have a JavaScript, if you have an HTML button and you want to deal with the button on click, you could bind your native code handler to that JavaScript button on click. One thing very important here is the question, are we still in an online or offline situation with this kind of use of web technology? Well, the answer is, I think in 9 out of 10 cases, you can still opt to be offline. What does that mean? Suppose we come back to that JavaScript sum function, and you have that in a JavaScript file, and that JavaScript file is hosted on tmssoftware.com/sum.js, for example. So if you are in an online situation, that can be the URL from where your sum function is loaded, and you can then use it. Okay. Advantage of the online situation is, suppose there was a bug in my sum function, I can just change it online, and your native application using it will immediately have the fixed version. But if it's important for you that you can use the application also in an offline scenario, then of course what you do is you set it to offline, and then it will automatically embed that sum.js file as a resource within your executable, load it in the browser, and everything will run, but you don't need an online connection at that time. So let us have a look at two WX components. So WX stands for web technology. Let us have a look at two components. I will first of all introduce our FNC mapping component. Obviously that uses web mapping services. Meanwhile, a lot of them, and a little bit similar as we offer access to cloud storage services, where with one service property you switch between Google, Microsoft, etc. Same concept applies to FNC Maps. So with one property, and of course in this case also the API key, with one property you switch between the service you want to use. So there is no lock-in if you develop an application against Google Maps, and at some point you say, okay, another service has a better conditions or whatsoever better. With one property switch, you are starting to use that other mapping service. So let me briefly show you that concept. So I drop the FNC Maps component on my form. I will now not use Google.
You're not sharing your screen.
My PowerPoint is okay. Thanks for remarking. Now we are here. Okay, so this is FNC Maps. Google cannot access it because I have not set my Google API key, but no problem. I set the service to, here is my service property, to open layers, and now I can use the mapping. Okay, and so what I will do is, here I have some code snippet to save some time. I will just add that code snippet into the button click handler. So what do we have? I looked up the longitude and latitude of Bruges. And so what I do is I add a marker to the location, the longitude and latitude of Bruges, and then I force my map to center its position on Bruges, so that Bruges will be really in the center of my map. Why? Okay, a little mistake, but let's compile and run this application. So standard, it's this is the standard location. We start up the maps with all the services. Anyone knows what the real center is that we? That's correct. So it's yet another mug. It's indeed, it's the center, it's the Statue of Liberty in New York that we center all the maps as a default position on. We thought that was a nice thought to center this map up because it gives you the liberty to choose your mapping service. Okay, so I centered on Brugge, and here, well, obviously I think something went wrong. That this my marker is missing, so I'm not sure.
The file is on the marker.
The file, there must be something with the file from my marker. Anyway, what I will show you something different because I tell you a little story. Once I was also demonstrating Google Maps in that case, and okay, I must have made the Google API key, my key, I must have made it visible at some point. To find out 1 month later that it costed me 200 euros with someone apparently having used that Google mapping key. Okay? That happened to me once, so it will not happen to me twice. I'm not sure what the person did with it, but anyway, I deleted the key and then the problem was gone. Okay, I want to show a demo with Google Maps, and let's take these to show you that it's not just mapping, visualizing things on the map. It can do actually much more. Also calculate directions, for example, and that is what I wanted to use this demo for. So what I have is this trick. So that's my Google key. I copy it and I paste it, and now it works like this. So now I would like to ask who thinks he comes from the far away in Europe? Someone from Germany here?
Yeah, but not so far.
Someone from Finland? No? Sweden? Finland? What's your city in Finland?
Helsinki.
Helsinki, okay. The capital of Finland, and Brugge. So let's ask the directions from Helsinki to Brugge. I don't think you did the trip with the car. Okay, but if you would have done it with the car, that's like 2,400 kilometers. It would have taken you 1,700 minutes. So I think it was a good idea to take the airplane.
By bike also.
Yeah, and yeah, let's or even walking, talking about the challenge. And here you have the description of these directions in all the segments of this route. What I also wanted to show you is a completely different type of web library that we expose via this technique. And this is the formula. No. It's the mat editor. That's the one that I wanted to show. So imagine, I'm not sure how many of you still need to deal with these complex maths after high school. No, none of you? Okay. But suppose that in your business you still need to deal with these nice formulas, of which we all have fond memories. But this is a math editor. So as you can see here, I can insert all kinds of complex things. So can you imagine solving equations like that? But anyway, it shows you how you can take advantage of existing web technology to deal with mathematical formulas from a native application here exposed via these WX
It's a bit like
controls.
the Word Maths Editor. Is it based on the same?
I don't think so, no. It's an open source mod editing library for the web, but we take advantage of here in the.
Microsoft uses the same.
I cannot imagine that it's exactly this the library from Microsoft. Oops. Okay. And with that, we have seen the demos that I wanted to show you. Okay. And so my conclusion, I think, is with so many things at our fingertips, that even after, I think it's already 28 years that Delphi exists, that still after 28 years, it's still a wonderful time to be a Delphi developer. Thank you for being here. Thank you for attending. Also, if between sessions, etc., there are more FNC related questions, don't hesitate to approach me and to ask whatever comes up. If there are other urgent questions for now, just fire. Yes?
Maybe one question about how this library cover all platforms. For example, if more or less for Windows it's working, for example, maybe some problems in Android or Raspberry or for sure it's have to work on all platforms.
Correct. So I put it in a different way. We strive for making it work in all the platforms. Mm-hmm. We test that it works in all the platforms. Sometimes we hit a wall that it doesn't work in some particular platform. Then we mention, okay, sorry, but this platform is not available. And I give you a real example of such a situation. You have one example, maybe mine example is different. There are some cloud services that are not course enabled. And if they are not course enabled, that means that you cannot use the cloud service out directly from a web application, from the web client. So cloud services in FNC that have not course enabled, we cannot make them, it's beyond our control. We simply cannot make them accessible from a web interface. But then, okay, we mention it doesn't work in this scenario. Maybe, I don't know what your case is.
Yeah, I'm just curious about where from I can read this about it's not implemented yet in Android or
yeah,
maybe tricky for me.
Mm-hmm. If I remember correct, for the web, for the example that I have, we mark that it is desktop only, for example. Well, so in some cases it's marked desktop only. That's for sure. Okay, so that's something to pay attention to. But I would say it's like maybe 2% out of the entire library of components that somewhere hits a wall. It's something beyond our control. We cannot go to the cloud service and switch on the course enable, and sometimes it's not even desirable to do that.
That exact problem, that it's working pretty well as expected on Windows, but on Android not, because it's keyboard on top of.
Yeah, the Android keyboard handling is completely different, and for example, our FNC Rich editor suffers from that. That keyboard in Android just behaves quite different. That's another corner case, I would say. That's correct. Yes. Other questions? Okay, no more questions, so I would say make your choice, stay here or go to the other session upstairs, and then we just continue. Thank you.
It's a visual session on the FNC maps, connecting maps. Is it upstairs?
Yes, it's upstairs.
Everything upstairs. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not two sessions.